told God, now at this point, we don't know if our daughter's going to make it. They're doing everything they can so that she doesn't die. And then now I might die. I gotta talk to God. This is it.
This is Touched by Heaven. Everyday encounters with God. Those moments when heaven and earth collide and we see God. We see His hand reaching out to us, attempting to get our attention. Can you bargain with God? It's biblical. Yeah, it's there. And I know people personally who've attempted to bargain with God. We have Tiana here today. She's ready to make a trade.
I was like, okay, I gotta talk to God. I need to know that you can hear this, because I'm going to make sure I'm praying with every little bit I have in me so that this prayer gets to you.
She is ready to make a trade. And is God up for the trade?
Hello.
Well, how we doing?
We're doing good. Right on time. I'm impressed.
So am I. Mom was going to name her Tatiana, but thought it was a little over the top. In her youth, her God view was a bit different than most.
I grew up in a fundamentalist, doomsday cult. So
Doomsday cult?
Doomsday cult.
Fire and brimstone kind of stuff?
I mean, yeah, pretty much. A lot of talk of Armageddon. And then the more involved I got, I ended up realizing that there was a lot of, just things weren't lining up. There was a lot of hypocrisy. They weren't exactly going with what the Bible said. And so I started to speak up about it, and that got me kicked out of that religion.
Well.
So I packed my clothes in trash bags and I lived out of my car, and I was only 20 at the time. But I ended up meeting my husband, and we dated and we got married, and we got pregnant right away. And I had my son, and then I had my daughter, and I decided I wanted to go all hippie and have her at home. So I gave birth to our daughter at home, and it was an incredible experience and perfect.
Let's stop there on baby number 2, Dylan.
However, I started noticing within 24 hours that she wasn't eating, she wasn't nursing. So we decided with our midwives to go to the ER.
The ER nurse said, nope, she's nursing now. She's good. You can take her home.
And I spent the whole night awake watching her. And at the time, I didn't know what seizures look like in infants. So she was actually seizing every hour, an hour and a half. I just assumed that it was just that little thing that babies do when they kind of jump up or get shocked. It looks like they get shocked in their sleep. And I didn't know that's how babies looked when they seize. So I just was like, why is she doing this so often? By the time morning came, I was changing her diaper and she went completely blue on me. Just saw the life leave her. I started to do infant CPR because I knew that. And we rushed to the hospital, and they took her, because she was turning blue on them as well. We were able to bring her back, but she would desaturate just as soon as we were able to get some color on her. And so they took her, into the PICU, and they started everything at running tests, spinal taps, all that stuff. And they found out that she had group B strep meningitis.
And this is where Let's Make a Deal with God begins.
And so group B strep is a bacteria that lives inside of our bodies. And I had group B strep in me. And she happened to swallow it as she was coming out of the birth canal, and ingesting it.
Is that the only way you can get something like that? Is that the way?
Yes, that is the way. So I gave birth to her at 38 weeks. She's now admitted into the PICU. Her meninges, which is the lining of the brain, is completely inflamed. There's a ton of pus around it because that's what the body does with inflammation. And they told me, we don't know if she's going to make it. Right now, our goal is that, we keep her alive. And I was just completely shocked. I mean, I literally fell to the ground and screamed when they told me what was happening, just because I had just given birth and it was my baby.
Where's Dad at this point?
Dad is right by my side. He was totally freaking out when I had to do CPR. It's when the doctors take you to that little room, or you see it in the movies and you're like, uh-oh, that's bad news. So that's what happened. We went into the little room and I was like, why are they taking us to the little room? And they told us that she had the groupie strep. And that's when I just collapsed to the floor. My husband, he like fell down with me and tried to lift me up because he was like, it's okay. It's okay. Because I felt really guilty. I thought it was my fault because it was my body. Right. And seeing her completely intubated on a feeding tube in an induced coma was, only 3 days old, well, 2 days old at this point. It was horrible. So I, set up station in the hospital room with her and I was pumping milk because my milk started to come in. And the nurses said, well, we can give her your breast milk through the feeding tube. And so go ahead and pump. I was pumping and I was shivering so bad. I was in the room with the nurse. We had a big suite. And the nurse saw me and she was like, Mom, are you cold? And I was like, oh, I'm a little bit. I think it's just my milk coming in. And she's like, no, you know what? Let's take your temperature. And so she took my temperature and I had 106, like point something, point one, point two,
106.
106. And I just saw her eyes get real big and she's like, okay, let me take it one more time. And then she did it again. And I was like, what is it? And she's like, it's 106. And I was like, oh no. And I started to sob because I thought, great, now I'm sick. And now I've gotten my baby sick because even though she was in that little incubator thing, I was touching her and giving her kisses and talking to her. And I thought, oh my gosh, now I've gotten her sick. I've exposed my sick baby to something else. And she said, no, she's not even breathing your air. Don't worry about it. Um, but she's like, but you need to go down to the ER. So right when she said that, my husband and my father-in-law walk into into the room, and I could just see like my husband's face was completely like it just was defeated. You know what I mean? Where he was like, "What is going on? Like everything is just not okay."
Tiana is pushed to the ER by her husband.
I get into the room, they put all the leads on me, and my heart rate is like 260 beats per minute. I am tanking with in my oxygen
Could
intake.
you feel that heart rate? Could you feel it?
I did, but I thought it's because I was nervous, because I was
Wow.
stressed. So it felt like your heart's coming out of your chest, and I was just like, but I was like, I'm just nervous. Like I've been, told that my baby might die and now I'm sick. And so I just thought it was stress. I didn't feel good, but I didn't think it was like that bad.
It was bad.
Nurse's eyes go big. She pushes some button. My husband's just standing there and they say, you know what? We need you to step out of the room because we're going to have some people come in. And she's like, Mom, are you having a hard time breathing? And I was like, a little bit, but I'm just stressed right now. And she's like, okay. And so they were like, we're going to put you in isolation. We're calling the CDC. We don't know what you have. And we can't control it right now because you're officially going into sepsis. So sepsis is when the infection reaches your blood. And once it's in your blood, it just spreads into all of your organs. I said, am I dying? And she said, we are doing everything we possibly can so that doesn't happen. Okay. And I said, you know what? I need to talk to my husband. Can I please talk to my husband? And they were like, you're in isolation. We can't let anyone in here. And I said, I know, but can I at least talk to him on the phone? And so there was one phone on the outside of that room, and it was a cord phone, like the ones they have on the wall with a giant cord. I called my husband and I said goodbye. Um, I told him I loved him and that I loved our kids. And it was like the most heartbreaking conversation. He was home with our son. Gary, my father-in-law, was with Dylan upstairs.
This
Yes.
sounds like 9/11 when people are calling from the building. It's like, well, I'm done, and just the horror on both ends of that.
Oh yeah, he was sobbing. I was sobbing. It was horrible. It was absolutely horrible to say goodbye to someone that you love. I was grateful I got the opportunity, but
Yeah,
it was
can we
just
just
like,
pause for 1 second here because you're stating it very matter of factly, and then I say goodbye. But in the midst of that, I mean, talk about that. What is that like? I can't imagine what that is like.
it is like I. It is like a piece of your soul getting ripped out of you. It's like you. It is the most heartbreaking thing to know that you might not ever see your family again, your children, your little children, and that you're going to possibly leave your husband widowed with a baby that might die, might not die, and then with a 2-year-old and no family, because we were in Northern California. I know his father was here, but I remember feeling that he felt so alone as well. I was very sick. I felt like I was dying.
Really?
So I,
What does that feel
um,
like?
it just feels like kind of like a light going dim. You feel like that. I don't know if you've ever seen like a light, like a flame flicker away, or a light bulb go like lose its electricity, and so it just feels like that energy is just like kind of leaving you really slowly, um, and you just don't have strength anymore. So you kind of relinquish to it, just like the process, because there's no fighting it. Your body's shutting down.
And you're feeling that light go out.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely feeling that light go out at that point. Um, our son woke up and I could just hear him asking if it was mommy, and my husband was crying. And so I just said, I'm going to let you go because I can't talk to him at all. I'm like sobbing at this point. And he was like, okay, but call us back. Okay. And I said, I will. So, I was sobbing and I just handed the nurse stood at the door and just, was silent the entire time, witnessing how horrible it is to see someone that just gave birth to say goodbye to her family. She just hung it up and closed the door. And my female doctor came in shortly after and said, okay, we're going to give you a spinal tap. Okay. We need to find out if it's in your spinal fluid. And I said, okay, I understand. I was like, okay, I gotta talk to God. This is it. Like, if I already talked to my husband, I said goodbye, and now like I need to have a serious conversation with God. So I started to pray, and I have never in my life prayed this hard. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where or like you've ever prayed where you're literally like it feels like you're praying with every single fiber of your being. Like if there every atom that composes you is united and fused together with every single word that you are saying. And I mean, like I could physically feel I was putting everything I could, any bit of strength I had in me, into my prayer. My tears were going down my face. I had my hands clasped because I was lying on my side, and I was like, I need to know that you can hear this, because I'm going to make sure I'm praying with every little bit I have in me so that this prayer gets to you. And I told God. Now, at this point, we don't know if our daughter's going to make it. They're doing everything they can so that she doesn't die. And then now I might die. So I said, look, if this is what needs to happen, if you need to take me in order to save her, I'm down. Let's do it. I'm shaking your hand. This is a deal. I'm happy to do it. I need you to give me everything that she is going to end up experiencing. You need to give it to me. I can take it. And there was no reply or anything. I was just praying that. And I just kept saying that over and over again. I need you to give it to me. I need you to choose me. Let her live. Let her not have anything to deal with or anything. I'm happy to do this. Like, this is the time. I'm telling you right now, like, pick me. I want it. And when I was praying, a doctor came in, not my female doctor. This was a male doctor. And he had a white coat on, just like any doctor. And he came in, and I kind of opened my eyes because I heard the door open. I saw him coming in. And then I just closed my eyes because I was like, oh, I don't care right now. I don't like, I'm in the middle of prayer. Like, you need to just leave me alone. But I didn't say that. I just kept praying and ignoring him. And he touched my shoulder because I'm lying on my left side. So he touched my shoulder, and I opened my eyes again because this is the first time someone has touched me that's not completely gowned up and covered. I'm in isolation. And he, so that was really nice because people were treating me like I was, this horrible contagious thing. And they should have, they didn't know what was going on. But so he touches my shoulder, and then he leans like down so I can see his face. And he says, you know, everything's going to be all right. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, yeah, I know. And I closed my eyes and kept praying. Like, just like in my head, I'm like, can you just go away? Like, I'm trying to pray here. And he like touched my shoulder again. And he said, we're not going to do the spinal tap. You don't have meningitis. And I was like, oh, okay. And I closed my eyes again and I'm like, why won't he just leave? Like, I really am praying right now. I don't like, obviously, I keep closing my eyes so he can leave me alone because I don't really care about anything they have to say. I'm in the middle of, like, in a very deep conversation. I'm like, shoot, I'm making a contract here with my life with God. So you need to like leave. But I didn't say that. I was just frustrated. And then he stayed there with his hand on my shoulder. And I looked at him again and he smiled. And then I closed my eyes and I heard him leave.
Let's pause right about here. Then more with Tiana. Remember, she was making that bargain, that prayer. We're going to get back to that. But right now, a quick Patreon shout out to Penny and Pat Leone. Thank you so much for supporting us through Patreon. You know, it's amazing how many people in Patreon, in the family, have stories, have shared stories, are promising me their stories and things like that. I was just reflecting. I was on Tammy. Tammy was talking about how she kept waiting for her name, you know, the shout out, like right now. She was waiting for her name. And then she was going to give me her story. That was the plan.
So I become a Patreon, and I was like, okay, when he says my name in a podcast, I'll know I'm supposed to call, right? That's how in my mind I had it set up. And so every week I'd listen, he never said my name. And I'm walking my dog and I'm listening to your podcast, and I didn't hear it audibly, but I hear the Holy Spirit say, no, I want you to do it now. And I'm like, but he didn't say my name. pretty
And I'd like to announce our Patreon shout out this show. Tammy Foltz, ladies and gentlemen, is helping us out on a monthly basis through Patreon. If you want to go to episode whatever this is, or just go to patreon.com and search for Trapper Jack, and you too can join Tammy and others who are helping us keep this thing together. So I don't know if you know her or not, but she's pretty terrific. We would love to have you in the Patreon family, and of course your story as well. Come to here to touchedbyheaven.net, click your way through to patreon.com, and thank you so much for your ongoing support. All right, let's get back to Tiana here on Touched by Heaven, everyday encounters with God.
Like, I want to say a few minutes after that, my female doctor, like opens the door and she says, we're taking you out of isolation. We're not doing the spinal tap. You don't have meningitis. We're moving you to the ICU. And I was like, yeah, I know. We're not going to do spinal tap. She's like, yeah, we're not going to do that. Okay. And they gave me they had to give me three different full spectrum antibiotics simultaneously, along with an oral one. And I mean, I was just being loaded up with antibiotics because they were like, well, we don't know exactly what it is, but here you are and you're stabilizing. So this is working. I spent one night in the ICU, and then I was transferred to labor and delivery because I had just given birth. So that's where they put you. And I did 2 more days there. So a total of 3 days in the hospital.
Temperature's down now? Everything came down?
Everything came down.
Pretty quickly after the antibiotics and all that stuff?
Oh, yeah. Once they found like the cocktail that was working, it just started to come down. And then they were like, you know what? You're stable. This worked, but you can go, you're going to be discharged. And I was like, okay. Now I have been 3 days in that whole part of the hospital. And they were like, when I came to get discharged, it was a male doctor. He came in and he was like, okay, so here's what happened and what you did. And I was like, well, did anything culture? And he was like, no, nothing cultured. There was no sign of any bacteria in there. We don't know what. I was like, what happened? He's like, I have no idea. We have no idea what happened to you. And I was like, oh, okay. And he's like, I don't even know how you recovered this quickly, considering you were in sepsis. And I was like, was I going to die? And he was like, yes, you were. He's like, with sepsis, you have a 50-50 chance. And usually when you're showing symptoms like you were, he's like, you were already heading downhill. I don't know what happened, he said. It just, whatever it was, it fixed itself. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. He's like, yeah, it's pretty much a miracle. And I was like, oh, okay. I'm like, thank you. I was just feeling still sad because my baby, at this point, we were waiting for the results of her CT to see if there was any permanent brain damage. Um, and so that day that I was getting discharged, we got told that there wasn't any brain damage. The seizures, they said, were a result of the active infection. But once the antibiotics for her kicked in, it resolved that.
Okay.
So the good news is that Dylan was going to live. The scary news was that I didn't know. Well, we didn't know yet what type of damage like the meningitis had done, because meningitis can do a lot of stuff. It can give you cerebral palsy. It can give you speech disorders. It can give you hearing loss. Hearing loss is a really big one with it. So, but anyway, but before I get to there, when I was being discharged, I told the doctor, I said, look, can I have the name of the doctor that was treating me down there? It was a male one. I know I had a female doctor, but there was another male one who came to talk to me. I want to say thank you. He was the only one that touched me and was just so kind. Everyone else was, busy working and doing what they had to do. But I remembered, I'm like, and I was kind of rude to him. I said, but I just would like to say thank you, or write him a thank you letter if I can just have his name. And my husband's there, and the doctor was like, okay, I'll look into it when we come. He's like, just give me a minute. So the doctor went and made a phone call. An hour later, he comes back and he's like, well, I don't know what to tell you, Tiana, but I looked over the records. We looked over everybody who had clocked in, who was scheduled that day, and there was no male doctor working in the ER at that time. And I was like, he's like, are you sure it was a doctor? And I was like, yes, it was a doctor. I'm like, well, maybe it could have been a nurse or something.
There was no male doctor. There was no male nurse.
And I was like, that is weird. And he's like, yeah, he's like, weird things like that happen in the ER. And I remember having,
I like that. At least they're acknowledging, right?
he was like, look, he's like, weird things like that happen in the ER. He's like, I don't know what you believe or whatever. He's like, but I can tell you that there was no male doctor working that day and no male nurse.
So Tiana was coming home, and baby Dylan had just 2 more weeks in the hospital. Then every 3 months, baby Dylan was checked out by a neurologist and by an audiologist to make sure nothing was developing.
So finally, at 2 years, it was supposed to be for 5, but because she had passed every hearing test and she had passed every neurological exam every 3 months for the past 2 years, the doctor said, you know what? I don't even think it's worth seeing her for another 3 years. She's clear. So I think we're ready to discharge you. Yeah. And I was like, really? Like, this was amazing because, it was very hard. Every time we'd go back, it was a reminder of what had happened. So that was in June 2012.
Okay.
And we were just so excited, like it was like we made it. We made it through, and I'm alive and she's alive and there's nothing wrong with her. And it's fantastic. And it was July 1st. And we were selling our house. My friend was watching. I was cleaning the house, because we were getting ready to sell. And my friend was watching the kids for me. And so I went to go pick them up, and I knocked on the door and she said, it's open. And I grabbed the door, I turned it and opened it. And when I did that, there was just this very, very loud white noise in my right ear. And I remember thinking I had like a clog or something, or like it popped. I needed to pop it. So I kept like opening my jaw, and she's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I think I need to pop my ear. It's plugged or something. I just saw this white noise and it felt like a lot of pressure there. And she's like, huh, that's weird. So anyway, I picked them up and I just kept fiddling with my ear and wondering like, what the heck is this? We went, my husband and I ended up going to Lowe's that night with the kids because we were looking at things we had to buy. And he was like, you're yelling. And I'm like, I'm not yelling. And he's like, yeah, you're yelling. And I'm like, well, maybe it's my ear. I'm like, it's still acting weird. I still hear that white noise and there's that pressure. And he's like, he's like, well, I think you should go to the doctor because that's weird that it's been going on like now into the night. And the next morning I woke up severely sick with vertigo. Like literally the whole room was rocking back and forth. Like I was on a little, like a pirate ship or something. I started to vomit and I vomited to the point of passing out. My husband called the ambulance. I went to the ER again, and I was like, what now? They didn't find anything. They gave me really strong antivirals. They gave me Valium to stop the vertigo, and they were like, you're just going to have to see an audiologist in the next 2 days. So I go to the audiologist, and she says, I'm so sorry. You have sensor in your, I can't pronounce this one. You basically have high frequency hearing loss in your right ear. And I was like, well, and I said, but I hear noise. And she's like, yeah, that's tinnitus. It's because that type of hearing loss is specifically related to nerve damage in your brain. We can't explain it. It's something that happens to like 1,000 people a year. Usually, though, it's people 60 and over. You're a really rare case. I have a permanent hearing loss in my right ear, and I've had it since then. I was really devastated when that happened. It was just like we had just gotten over everything that had happened with me and Dylan. I thought we were good. Everything was clear. And I was like, I just need to go outside. I can't stand hearing this white noise. And then when I go outside, it kind of calms it down. So I remember going outside, and I looked up at the sky, and then it just hit me, like out of nowhere, hit me. And I said, oh, the exchange, the trade-off, this is it. I told you to give it to me. And here I am, right after Dylan gets discharged and everything's fine with her. I get sudden onset hearing loss, one of the main symptoms of meningitis. And then it was like, okay, I remember. I signed up for this. I begged you. I told you. I demanded you to do this. Okay, I'll be okay. And my hearing loss then became a source of joy, because it was like God listened, and he listened, and he came through. He gave me what I asked for, and that was to whatever was going to happen to Dylan to give to me. And so that's one of the things that I believe happened. Because there was no other scientific explanation for anything else or why it happened to me at the age of 20, 25. And I remember like just keeping it to myself. And then at night when I went to bed, I talked to my husband. I said, hey, I need to tell you something. And I told him about the prayer. I didn't tell anybody about that prayer. It was private. There was no reason to share it. And I told him that I had made, I had tried to make a deal, and I think it worked. So, and he was like, just like, oh my goodness, Tiana, I didn't know you did that. And I was like, yeah, I did. I was like literally telling God, please give it to me. I need it. Like, I will take it for her. And here I am.
I know of other stories like this where God will take somebody up on the deal. Not that he is certainly merciful enough that you didn't have to have that in your prayer, nor did he have to answer that prayer. He could have just said, you're fine, baby's fine, and just do that. But to let you know in his own way that we can, his ways are his ways. They're so mysterious. But for him to say, okay. I believe your story. I totally believe what happened to you is because you prayed that and he listened to a prayer and answered a prayer.
Well, I also forgot to mention the Ursuline sisters. So there is a group of Ursuline sisters who pray continuously. These are nuns, right? And
is this cloistered nuns type thing?
Yes, they're cloistered nuns.
They don't go anywhere. They just stay in their place and pray. Yeah.
Yes. And they sent that request that my in-laws had made to pray for Dylan and me when we were getting sick. They prayed continuously the entire time we were in the hospital. They were praying for us. We went to see the Ursuline sisters, the nuns, because they were having a big yard sale, kind of like a garage sale there, because they were remodeling their convent, and they wanted to, get rid of a lot of things. And so there was a lot of cool stuff they had there. And one of them is these chests. And out of all of them, I saw this one. I was like, I was like, I like that one. And so I asked one of the nuns how much it was. And they said, oh, that belongs to Sister Martha. Sister Martha is the nun that my in-laws would have direct contact with. She's the one who sent the prayer to the cloistered nuns to pray. So I was really excited to see her. I was like, "Oh my gosh, Sister Martha!" Because I knew of her because when we brought Dylan to visit when she was a baby after she was all well, I got to meet her because they wanted to meet the baby they were praying for. And so when it was her chest, I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." I'm like, "I picked your chest out of all these chests." And she was like, "Oh yeah." I had her sign. I was like, "Can Cecily, can you sign it?" And so she signed the inside of the chest with her name. She thought it was the silliest thing I was asking her. And then I ended up finding out that because I asked her, I'm like, "How old is this chest?" And she's like, "Oh, it's over 100 years old." We brought the chest in and it's in my bedroom. Dylan came in. Dylan is 7 at this time. She came in and she looks at it and she's like, "That's from the nun that prayed for me." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "Did Dad tell you?" And she's like, "No, that's from the nun that prayed for me. That's Miss Sister Martha's." And I was like, "How do you know?" And that her signature's on the inside, so she wouldn't know. And she was like, she's like, "I just know." She's like, "I remember seeing it. I don't know when she saw it. I don't know what that means." But I thought it totally gave me goosebumps that she recognized and knew that it was Sister Martha's chest without us telling her anything about it.
At
So
2 days, 3 days of age, or whatever, whenever this prayer went out, right?
yes, yes. And so I don't know. Exactly. She was only 3 days old. I think when they called and she was finally in the hospital and everything, and we contacted everybody because we knew what was going on. And so I just was just like, I don't know. I guess God is always connecting us. Again, like, why did I pick Sister Martha's chest out of all the chests? How did
So he
Dylan
could
know
do
that was
that.
Sister
So he could
Martha?
do that with Dylan. It's like, so he could do that. It's just
Yeah.
crazy. Wow.
It's so crazy. Again, like constantly showing me that he's there. And I've asked Dylan about it. Like, how did you know? Now she's 12. How do you know that that was Sister Martha's chest? And she was like, "I don't know. It was just in my memory. I don't know what that means."
That's
But
just God being
again,
God. That's just God
yeah,
being God.
it's just it's
And
God
it's
being
further
God.
clarification that, yes, I answered your prayer. And yes, all of that, I was right there. I was there for both of you. I heard your prayer. I answered your prayer. Here's
Yeah.
the chest to kind of back it all up. They were praying for you. Their prayers were involved in sealing the deal, if you will. And he's there the whole time.
Right. Right. It was that reassurance that they were connected to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And so again, anchoring more so my faith in God and then eventually leading me, to the Catholic Church, which has been like just a full circle moment where I finally feel whole.
We brought in Carolyn that night at your church, our friend Carolyn, and
Yeah.
and it was just the best Easter vigil mass I've ever been to. Everything, Father, to the music, the musicians, the singers, you guys, 18 came in fully that night. And one of the strongest memories was that when all of you were being baptized, of course, individually and everything, but it was your voice. It was your voice when Father was leading you all. Do you all renounce Satan and blah, blah, and goes through the whole baptismal,
Yeah.
whatever that is called, but where you say yes to things and no to things and all of that. And it was your
Yeah.
voice saying, you were repeating louder than anybody. You are so all in. Let's put it that way.
You're not the first person to tell me that. They're like, "We heard your voice." And I was like, "Oh boy, I didn't realize I was that loud." But I was all in. I was here. I was making, that commitment. And I was just, I was definitely, I wanted God to hear me. I wanted God to know, like, yes, I want this. So, thank you.
It was very beautiful. It really was very beautiful.
Oh, thank
Wow.
you.
Wow, Tiana. Wow. I know some people will say, well, that's not a very nice God to do that, but he was listening to a prayer. And as you said, you have never prayed so fervently that every fiber of your body said yes to this, and he answered.
Yeah, I mean, I when I say I was demanding it, I really was. I was like, I need you to do this. Like, please do this. I want you to do this. It was a lot of, and I don't think, I think if he would have just healed us and we would have been fine, I would have just kind of forgotten about it. But it was that added piece of that making that full exchange that was like, oh, this is God. And he is coming through with what I demanded I wanted.
The other thing that strikes me is that the doctor who came in, that doctor who smiled and touched you, and it's going to be okay. It reminds me, and I wish I could remember which episode it was, but in that particular case, the woman who was in the hospital bed, the doctor came in, and what I love, at least he came in with a name patch on him, a name
Like a name
badge.
tag.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Gabriel. And he came in like 2 or 3 times, whatever it was, and same story. Hey, I want to thank that Dr. Gabriel. We don't have a Dr. Gabriel. We don't have a Dr. Gabriel on staff. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it could have been the same guy. You might have had the same guy. Didn't even have to change his uniform. I don't know. And what is the takeaway from all of this?
That God is here and is listening to us. And when you pray, I mean, if he's with you, he's real. And I've been listening to your podcast, which is incredible, hearing these stories. It's so like fortifying, and it's all in different ways. It really helps solidify your faith, and for someone that has experienced something like this, it's like, okay, I'm not the only one. This stuff really does happen all the time.
All the time. Thanks, Tiana. What else is there to say? She offered a deal. God said, okay. And all the signs say that God was in every moment of it, listening to every moment of it, proving to her he heard every moment of it. Ursula Nunn's involvement in it, how Dylan was somehow aware of the nuns in the midst of all of that, and saying, okay. Don't know that he's always going to take that deal, but he took it this time. Just amazing. This Touched by Heaven episode brought to you by Medjugorje in October with Medjugorje Pilgrimage.life. I was just going through some audio from when we were over there in October. We were down in the chapel, and actually this was at the same time I was possibly going to be doing an interview with Maria, the visionary, and instead she decided to talk to everybody. So I took one for the team. I did. But I was just kind of, you can't hear her really well, but she was just telling, part of her story and all of this, and she was down. And this is one of the things that can happen just in the course of the week of staying with Maria.
It's completely our mind, like confession.
Yeah, like I say, you can't understand a whole lot. There was a little too much echo down there, but it's just one of the things that can happen is that suddenly she'll just kind of come walking by and she'll start, sharing with or, just participating in whatever the conversation has to be. It's just a cool part with staying one of the visionaries, and that being Maria, who still gets the daily apparitions, which you'll have access to. So here's what you do. It's October 13th through the 20th, but check out pricing from wherever you may be living at Medjugorje Pilgrimage.life. That's Medjugorje, Pilgrimage.life. It's Medjugorje, like no other place. It is where the Queen of Peace, Mary, has been appearing daily since June of 1981. All right, find out more. Medjugorje Pilgrimage.life. What's your story? Angel encounter? Divine intervention, near-death experience, whatever it may be, get a hold of me here at touchedbyheaven.net. Same place. You can click through on Patreon, and thank you so much for your support in making this all go. See you next week here at Touched by Heaven, Everyday Encounters with God. I'm Trapper Jack, just wandering through every week just to bug you a little.
Yeah, I know. Why won't he just leave?